Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This briefing is organized by Schoolhouse Connection, John Burton Advocates for Youth, and the Youth Law Center in collaboration with the offices of Representative Danny Davis and Senator Bob Casey. Senator Patty Murray is an honorary co-host. Before I introduce myself and tell you a little bit about Schoolhouse Connection, I would like to invite Debbie Rauscher and Jenny Pokempner to tell us about John Burton Advocates for Youth and the Youth Law Center. Debbie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much, Jordan. And I see that there's still people kind of logging on, so welcome to those of you who just joined. My name is Debbie Rauscher, and I'm with John Burton Advocates for Youth. We are an organization that is based in California, and we're focused on doing advocacy on behalf of students who have been in the foster care system, as well as those who've experienced homelessness. And we're just really, really excited to be partnering here today on this briefing.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here with everyone today. My name is Jenny Pokempner. I work at the Youth Law Center. The Youth Law Center is a legal and policy advocacy organization that advocates to transform foster care and juvenile justice systems across the nation so every child and youth can thrive. We believe strongly that young people with experience in foster care, in the juvenile justice system, and homelessness should have the supports they need to access and succeed in higher education, and that the bills we discussed today are urgently needed. So again, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Debbie and Jenny. And my name is Jordan, as I mentioned, and I am the Director of Youth Leadership and Scholarships with Schoolhouse Connection. Schoolhouse Connection is a national nonprofit working to overcome homelessness through education. We provide strategic advocacy and practical assistance in partnership with early childhood programs, schools, institutions of higher education, service providers, families, and youth. We also have a national scholarship program for students who've experienced homelessness, and two of our scholars are two of our speakers for today. I'll be moderating today's briefing, and I'll soon turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves. But first, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping pieces. We will be recording this session, and the recording will be emailed to all attendees after the briefing ends. And in an effort to best allow you to retain the information that we share today, we also drafted our thoughts in writing, and that document will be emailed alongside the recording. Throughout the session, there will be a team of experts in the background answering questions that are submitted through the Q&A feature on Zoom. And for questions that are specifically for our student speakers, we will have a brief Q&A if time allows at the conclusion of the briefing. Please make sure that you use the Q&A function on Zoom versus the chat, so we make sure that we see your submission. And any questions that we are not able to answer, we will follow up with via email if possible. And before we begin our panel, we are grateful that Senator Patty Murray will be kicking us off with a message via video, which we will play now.
Hi all, this is Senator Patty Murray, and I'm really glad to join you all for this important conversation today. And I just want to take a moment at the top here to thank all of the incredible young people who are leading this briefing and sharing their perspectives with us. Your stories and your advocacy really make a difference. Now, the simple fact is that every student deserves the opportunity to pursue higher education and to have the support they need to succeed once there. That, of course, includes students experiencing homelessness and in foster care. But for these students, pursuing higher education can really be an uphill battle, affording tuition, navigating complicated financial aid forms, finding housing, affording food, and getting other crucial support are all too often roadblocks for these young people. It shouldn't be this way. We owe it to every student experiencing homelessness or in foster care to make sure our higher education system is within reach and supports them. That's why I've worked with several of my colleagues in Congress to put together the Higher Education Access and Success for Homeless and Foster Youth Act, which would provide in-state tuition rates for students experiencing homelessness or in foster care, remove barriers for these students to participate in college access programs, ensure colleges and universities do more to reach out and support these young people, and help provide these students with the support they need to succeed once they've made it to college. These students deserve the same shot at success, so I'm going to keep fighting to get this bill signed into law and fighting for these young people. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Senator Murray. And with that said, let's transition to introductions from our speakers.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today and allowing us this platform to share our stories and speak our minds. My name is Anthony O'Leary, and I'm 21 years old and currently a junior at UCLA studying sociology and communications. I'm a class of 2019 Schoolhouse Connections Scholar and a Schoolhouse Connections State Policy Fellow. I've been sharing my story of foster care and homelessness since I was about 14. And I'm grateful to say that since I've been involved with Miss Jordan and the rest of Schoolhouse Connection, I've been able to do a lot of great things. So thank you for being here today.
My name is Jason Zott. I'm a 20-year-old student at University of Charlotte at North Carolina, where I'm currently pursuing a finance degree. I, along with Anthony, am also a 2019 Schoolhouse Connection Scholar and a State Policy Fellow, where I work with other state policy fellows to advocate on behalf of homeless and foster youth in pursuit of higher education.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Clues, and I am a 27-year-old student and professional from California. I am pursuing a degree in history and education at Cal Poly Humboldt. I am currently a youth advocate through the John Burton Advocates for Youth. I am a certified educational rights holder for at-risk youth in my community. And I am also a case manager for foster youth in high school in my county as well. I'm a single parent to 2 young children and an orange tabby, and I'm a former foster youth. I am dedicated to advocating for policies that will improve the lives of current and former foster youth, just like myself.
Thank you, Anthony, Jason, and Elizabeth. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to frame the overarching population and the issues that we'll discuss today. So public schools identified nearly 1.3 million children and youth experiencing homelessness in the 2019-2020 school year, which we know is an undercount, particularly given the challenges of identifying students during virtual learning throughout the pandemic. We also know that nearly 1 in 10 young adults aged 18 to 24 are estimated to experience homelessness on their own without a parent or guardian as unaccompanied homeless youth. These numbers are now likely much higher as a result of the pandemic and related economic and family stress. In the US, there are also nearly 424,000 youth in foster care. And every year, roughly 18,000 of these youth are aging out of the foster care system. So we also know that some form of post-secondary attainment is increasingly necessary to move out of poverty and homelessness and live a healthy, productive life. Yet youth experiencing homelessness in foster care are facing barriers in transitioning from secondary to post-secondary education, as well as barriers in accessing financial aid, college retention, and college completion. Today, we are going to discuss 4 bills that we think would have a direct impact on access to higher education for homeless and foster youth, and 2 additional programs that need additional support and revisions. So I'll kick us off. The first bill that we're going to start with is the one that Senator Murray mentioned. So the Higher Education Access and Success for Homeless and Foster Youth Act. We are going to be referring to it as HESHFE. So HESHFE was reintroduced in February of this year by Senator Patty Murray and Senator Rob Portman. And Anthony, can you kick us off with an overview of HESHFE?
Absolutely. So as mentioned, HESHFE works to remove barriers for homeless and foster youth in higher education. It covers many more areas than we'll be able to go over today due to time, but we have created 3 highlight areas that are extremely critical. So first, we highlight that HESHFE provides access and prioritization to on-campus housing and support for housing during winter and summer breaks. I can reside with this because I have a program right now at UCLA, Brew and Guardian Scholars, that provides me with housing during winter and summer break. This has been incredibly helpful for me, but without this program, I would not have had anywhere to go during the month of December nor during summer. And I may have found myself in unsafe environments or places that I simply don't know. When campuses do not provide housing year-round for students, it creates a critical barrier for the students that do not have outside resources. Elizabeth, I know that there's been some struggles recently finding colleges with on-campus housing. Do you have anything to share?
On-campus housing for me is critical and made more challenging by the fact that I have 2 children. I really can't afford off-campus housing in my area, while navigating school. And I'm finding that housing options are very limited for me with my circumstances. Housing prioritization and support would be super helpful for me. And housing is currently just a very stressful situation for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Jason, do you have anything that you'd like to share regarding your situations with on-campus housing?
Yeah, Anthony. I think it's important to note that when you attend schools away from your support system, it can make housing very difficult in many ways, especially with those at the highest risk. Having to stay somewhere temporarily can often leave you feeling like a burden, and is usually in a very unstable environment for breeding success. Not only are these environments unstable, but it's extremely hard to focus on school when you can lose your housing at any time.
Absolutely. So the second main point that we want to highlight is that HeSFE provides a liaison on campus who would support homeless and foster youth. Elizabeth, do you have anything to share about support that you received on campus and how it helped you?
I do. And before I say that, I do want to mention something that I kind of just thought of with what we were just talking about. But, it took me 7 years to get through community college. And, the reason that it took me so long is that I was constantly facing barriers with my housing situation. And, had I had the ability to obtain, stable housing, I probably would have been done a lot sooner. In regards to that, on-campus support, I was super fortunate to receive assistance from the Extended Opportunity Program and Services office on my campus. They helped me with book vouchers, purchasing a cap and gown, and just kind of overall support. It's been so nice to have a place to go if I have questions, but it's not really targeted support for foster youth. And so there are definitely some areas where they don't really have expertise and they don't understand the resources that I'm in need of. So having a targeted support program for foster youth could have helped me know the resources that I needed and prevented me from dropping out of college like twice.
Absolutely. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that stuff with us. Jason, do you have anything else to share regarding how a liaison would have been able to help you?
Yeah, I think having a liaison that understands your situation and can speak on behalf of you would help in a variety of ways, especially the kids in homeless and foster youth, is what we're talking about here. One of these ways is for me or kids like me to not have to tell our whole story to administrators financially every turn of the way when we need some help. But the biggest way I think a liaison can help me or kids like me is giving us the resources and knowledge I need or they need to get through college. For me, this was a big issue. I did not have much help navigating challenges requiring around financial aid and was not given proper information about access to grants I was eligible for. Most importantly, I wasn't talked to about the long-term impacts of decisions like taking out loans. In many of my personal circumstances, I talked to many different financial aid, and without them knowing everything going on, they say, hey, take a loan. And they just don't understand that for kids in our situation, taking a loan is putting us 5 steps back when we fought so hard to get where we are already. So I think that is another important way a liaison can help, talk to me or kids like me on behalf of these big, long life decisions. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason, for sharing those points. So the last point that we want to mention about HeFi is that it provides in-state tuition, even if your residency is unstable. So for students experiencing homelessness, it can be incredibly challenging to prove your residency. When you're moving frequently, and if you're not with a parent or a guardian, it can often be difficult to find the documentation necessary to prove that you've resided in the States. The difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition can be the determining factor for a student like us if we can afford to attend the school or not. For me, I know that without in-state tuition, I would not be attending UCLA right now. I'm thankful that I was able to get my residency figured out, but for many students, this is a struggle that they deal with for weeks to prove something that for their housed peers is somewhat of a seamless process. So to kind of wrap up and summarize what was shared, HeFi addresses barriers that have impacted homeless and foster students for far too long. We have seen our peers have to drop out, re-enter homelessness. We have struggled educationally, emotionally, and physically as a result of these barriers. HeFi is a sign of hope for me. It shows to me that I'm seen and that one day I will have equitable access to the same educational opportunities as my peers who have not experienced either homelessness or foster youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Jason and Elizabeth, for your insights as well. We're going to keep moving. The next bill that we're going to discuss is the Helping Foster and Homeless Youth Achieve Act. So this bill was introduced in December of last year by Senator Jackie Rosen and Senator Rob Portman. Jason, can you give us an overview of this bill?
Yeah, so this bill waives application fees to institutions of higher education for homeless and foster youth. Homeless and foster youth often are struggling financially at the time that they would be applying for college. Something as small as a $30 application fee can cause them not to be able to apply or attend college. Waiving a $30 application fee for this demographic of students would have relatively no impact on the colleges, but would open up significant opportunities for these students. Elizabeth, you were receiving waivers for college applications. Can you share a little bit about how that helped you?
Yeah, so the extended opportunity program and services that I mentioned earlier were able to provide me with 8 application waivers when I was applying to 4-year schools. And, had I not had these waivers, I likely would have been only able to apply for 1. So, that would have drastically limited my opportunities as I did not get accepted to every school that I applied to. So I'm so thankful that I was able to apply to that many.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jason and Elizabeth. The next bill is the Fostering Success in Higher Education Act, which was introduced in February of this year in both the US House and Senate by US Representatives Danny Davis, Raja Krishnamurthy, and US Senators Bob Casey, Sherrod Brown, and Tina Smith in the US Senate. Jason, can you walk us through this bill as well?
Yeah. So this bill will invest $150 million a year to support homeless and foster youth in enrolling and in graduating from higher education. This funding would provide grants to states to support homeless and foster youth, and the majority of these funds would go towards developing something called institutions of excellence. These institutions of excellence would serve foster and homeless youth and would provide support services and financial assistance, including covering the remaining cost of attendance after federal and state grants, comprehensive wraparound and case management services, and student and mental health services. I had an experience where I struggled with these resources. In my second year of college, I had to move off campus because I could not afford a meal plan or campus housing. If I had financial assistance that would have covered my remaining costs and case management services, I might have been able to remain an on-campus student. Luckily, though, I managed to find safe campus housing with family and had a vehicle to get around with. But for many students in my situation, one or both of those things may not be a reality for them. And unfortunately, in many of these situations, these students will drop out because they simply can't afford to go to college. Anthony, you have experience with wraparound case management services. Do you want to share a few thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, wraparound case management is incredibly helpful. And I mentioned that I have Schoolhouse Connection as a scholar, as well as the programs at school that provide targeted support to homeless and foster students. And it is invaluable to have a space where I feel safe and where my situation is understood and where I can ask questions and kind of be connected to the supplemental resources. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason and Anthony. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a program, and it is called Chafee Education and Training Vouchers Program. Elizabeth, can you walk us through this?
Yes. So the Chafee Education and Training Vouchers, or ETV for short, provide grants of up to $5,000 per year to students with experience in foster care to help pay for the cost of attending college. The program has been very successful, but the way that the program is implemented varies by state, and some of the current rules make it hard for students to get the maximum benefit from this program. We have drafted proposed changes to the program that are included in the written resource that will be emailed out. We would like to highlight two of those today. So I received Chafee funds when I first started college about 7 years ago. I remember distinctly that this was the largest grant I received, and I got the funds sent directly to me through a check. This meant that I could use the funds to fill in any gaps I had in attending college, which was really helpful. The other scholarship and grants I received were sent directly to my school, and there are often a lot of restrictions around how you can use the funds. The scholarships I did receive that allowed me to buy things I needed required burdensome proof of receipts, and it could sometimes be overwhelming to use the funds. Chafee funds being flexible and sent to the student fills in critical gaps that students in foster care need. And I'd actually love to give you an example of this. I would get some scholarships that got sent directly to the school, which meant, I'd have to use them on very specific items like books. And, there were things that I needed a lot more at that time. I had a newborn child. I could have really used it for formula or for rent or for diapers. And then the second thing I wanted to add is that to improve the Chafee ETV program, we need an increase in funding. Right now, only roughly 10 to 20% of eligible youth can receive an award. An increase from the current 43 million to at least 120 million is needed to ensure that students have access to this program. Secondly, we need to remove barriers to access. Currently, some states impose requirements beyond those imposed for other types of financial aid, like requiring written proof of every expense that a student uses the money for in order to get the funding. This can make it hard for students to get the funding when they most need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that Chafee can be so helpful and was so helpful to you. And hopefully we're going to see some of these improvements in this program so that it can help other youth. Like I know Anthony in particular, you did not receive Chafee funds. You would have, potentially qualified for. So hopefully we'll see those developments in the future. The next thing we want to talk about is barrier. So we want to discuss satisfactory academic progress standards, which for students that have experienced it immediately makes you feel a weight on your shoulders. So SAP standards require that students meet a minimum GPA and course completion requirement to maintain access to federal financial aid. Students who fail to meet the standards for 2 consecutive terms lose eligibility for aid unless they successfully appeal. What we are seeing is that roughly 1 in 4 students, 1 in 4 students do not meet their college's SAP standard in their first year. And rates of SAP failure for Black students are more than twice that of white students. Over a third of students with experience in foster care failed to make SAP in their first year, over a third. And just 13% of students who fail SAP remain enrolled and continue to receive a Pell Grant by the start of their second year of college. We invite you to take a look at the publication, How SAP Policies Impede Student Success and Equity, and recommendations on how to address this problem. And the link has been shared via the chat. When it comes to the standards that govern maintaining financial aid, little consideration is made for the additional challenges faced by homeless and foster students. As a result, these students, who are also disproportionately students of color, are further hindered by SAP requirements in their ability to succeed in college. We've shared all of our proposed improvements in the written document that's going to be emailed with the recording, but we would like to highlight two today. And Elizabeth, you've had some pretty significant experience with SAP. Would you be willing to share that?
Yes, thank you. I struggled with SAP when I first began my college journey. I didn't have a good support system at the time. And I mean, the concept of SAP was totally foreign to me. There really wasn't anybody at my school reaching out to me to explain what that process was. And I was kind of left alone to figure it out for myself. I ended up dropping out of college as a result. A few years later, I attempted to go back, but I was asked to complete an appeal. And on that initial form, it asked what my extenuating circumstances were that led to the drop in my GPA. And, I found that none of the circumstances listed matched what my experience was. I assumed that I couldn't receive financial aid and therefore didn't apply or restart college. A few years later, I found myself really wanting a college degree, so I gave it another shot. I was again forced to appeal SAP, and once again, none of the extenuating circumstances matched my experience. This time, however, I reached out to financial aid. I was really persistent in asking what I should do and, how I should write the appeal when, I really couldn't check any of those boxes. And through that persistence, I was ultimately assisted through the process, which was burdensome and time consuming. For the first year and a half of college, I didn't receive any aid and I had to pay out of pocket. And, it was hardly doable. With all of that said, a lack of support 7 years ago almost caused me to never earn a college degree. And the two suggestions I have for improving SAP are expanding how long students can continue receiving aid while they are working through SAP appeals. Had I been able to retain my aid, I might not have had to drop out 7 years ago. When we understand that these students are often receiving little to no support, little advising, and balancing numerous life obligations like leaving the foster care system, looking for stable housing, having children, we could work to provide the support necessary to see them succeed versus penalizing them for things that are often outside their control. Having the additional time to keep aid while finding the support you need is critical. Lastly, we need to broaden the criteria for appeal. Many of the circumstances that get in the way of student success, such as work or childcare obligations, food or housing insecurity, or academic challenges, are not considered grounds for an appeal of the loss of financial aid. The criteria should be broadened to take into consideration the realities of today's students. Had that been the case for me, I would have been able to stay enrolled or re-enroll during my first attempt to go back.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I can attest, I work with students around the country that have experienced homelessness, and SAP is having significant negative impacts on students all around. Elizabeth is not the only one. We're seeing these students get into college and have no support system virtually. And then within a semester are struggling with their GPA, and they don't even have a chance to identify the supports that they need before they're penalized to the point that causes them to drop out of college. So, Elizabeth, the fact that you have been as persistent as you have been to battle a system that was so against you is inspiring. And the fact that you're about to begin college again after 7 years, I mean, that says so much about you, but you shouldn't have had to go through it. So hopefully we will see improvements to SAP as well in the future. I would like to note to all attendees that we will be transitioning to a Q&A soon. We're going to transition to takeaways in a second and then go to Q&A. So we do have some time. If you have questions for the student speakers, if you can drop them in the Q&A panel, we'll try to hit as many as we can. And before we transition to a brief Q&A, I want to circle back for any takeaways for our listeners that our student speakers have.
I'll take the first shot at it, but I mean, thank you guys for allowing us to share our stories and our experiences, and this is an awesome platform to inspire us and inspire others to invest and think about these bills that are so important to us. But although this conversation is a powerful start, we are just 3 small students out of so many. It is so very critical to continue listening to the expertise of students like me and my peers with foster and homeless experience. There are many, many young people that do not have this platform or this opportunity to share their voice. And I know that we would all benefit from increased opportunities to partner with them and learn from them. So thank you guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would just like to emphasize that it's life-changing for homeless and foster youth to receive a college degree. And it can push our society forward as a whole, and it will, as we continue to knock off these barriers. Many homeless and foster youth don't believe college is an option for them because they're more focused on facing their basic needs. And helping them meet these basic needs will be more likely for them to succeed in the future. And I think that if we continue, and we need to continue removing barriers and increasing opportunities for homeless and foster youth so that they can make it through higher education, which in turn will open up many new doors for them and in their lives and give an opportunity for success and just enrich our country and our society as a whole.
Foster and homeless youth want to attend college, and what we are seeing is that they're struggling. Housing and basic needs are critical to succeed in the classroom. Higher education should be accessible to all, and right now, it feels like a privilege only afforded to those with the resources necessary to navigate it.
Yeah, that's very true. That was some powerful stuff that you all shared. Thank you for that. I am going to transition now into a Q&A time. So I've pulled one question for each of you. I also have a few other questions that are going to be open to any of you if you have thoughts regarding them. So the first one is going to be for Anthony. Anthony, you mentioned that it's important to listen to students who have experience in foster care and with homelessness. How can lawmakers or like professionals, K through 12 and higher ed staff do that? How can campuses do that?
Definitely. I mean, man, just continuing us to have a platform, have accessibility to share our experiences is a good starting place. I think as far as campuses go, as we mentioned, HEFE is a great opportunity to provide liaisons and people who are directly connected and understanding of what we're going through. And that's really just a beginning point to unravel into various opportunities for us to have more of a voice and have power to change what's going wrong right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then Jason, what can the audience for this briefing do to support the bills that were mentioned today?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Most importantly, you can call your representatives and some senators in your states and ask them to support the 4 bills we shared today. Schoolhouse Connection also does a lot of state and federal policy work, as we do state policy fellows, and we can help connect you to additional advocacy opportunities if you're interested. Just hit our chat up and we will get to you.
Yep, we sure can. Thank you, Jason. And Elizabeth, you are an advocate for youth in and from foster care, and I'm sure there are other alumni advocates here today. How can youth and young adult advocates help support young people aspiring to attend college who are also facing barriers?
When I reflect on my own time in care and what that transition was like to adulthood and self-sufficiency, I feel like part of the reason I'm even here today and able to share at all is because, I was so lucky to have met one person on my way out of care that just really saw the potential in me. And, what they did for me was they inspired me. They were always checking on me and showing up for me when it really mattered. And, I think because, post-secondary education was so foreign to me, and I hadn't gone through that before, having mentors and adult supporters around me that maybe didn't have all the answers, but were kind of willing to go to any lengths to get those answers, kind of gave me the courage to be able to advocate for myself, which I've had to do for myself and for my now two kids. And I think one thing that has personally helped me a lot is, when I face a barrier, I will call the John Burton Advocates for Youth and figure out what my rights are. And, I really connect a lot to my local community, and I just try to see what resources are available to me and to the students that I work with now. I think there are a lot of resources out there, and it's just, being able to be persistent and being able to navigate it and having that confidence. When you're young, it's really hard to do that, but so it's really important, I think, for the adult supporters and mentors out there to not give up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and these next questions are going to be open to anyone that wants to answer them. And if no one wants to, that's okay too. So the first one, have any of you participated in campus support programs for youth with experience in foster care or homelessness? If yes, how helpful have these programs been to you?
I think I'll take a stab at this. As I mentioned earlier, Bruin Guardian Scholars is here at UCLA on campus, a program that is directly connected with foster and homeless youth that essentially need resources. They need help navigating through this crazy time. And they've been a huge help in where I am today. They were a huge help during COVID. And I don't think I would be navigating as well through my college experience without them. They've provided me with enrollment to the courses that I need. They've, as I said earlier, offered campus housing during winter breaks and summer breaks and so much more, and as well as just kind of staying connected with us and understanding our situations, which is pretty much the foundation that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else like to share anything? I think one of the things that I immediately thought of was Elizabeth's point earlier about how like she did have the EOPS office, but it wasn't targeted to homeless and foster youth. And I know, like Elizabeth, when I was talking to you, you mentioned that oftentimes like students were the workers there. Like you were interacting with other students. And so it was hard to find some of those targeted supports, or even people that you felt could like understand your story. So I don't know if you have anything else to share about that, but I wanted to mention that.
The same exact thing came to mind. I'm getting ready to graduate from my local community college this week and getting ready to transfer. And I actually went to an EOPS awards night that they had last weekend. And, it's been distance learning, so I haven't really had the opportunity to really connect with them. And, what I felt like when I was sitting there waiting to be recognized was that, I didn't know anyone. Nobody knew me. And, granted, there was the extra barrier of, living through COVID times. I'd been in school before and utilized the EOPS office. Like nobody knew me. And I went through all of my schooling, always hearing about programs like Guardian Scholars and thinking, wow, that sounds so great. And, I think it's just a shame that we really don't have that same support for people that are going to trade schools or community college. Not all of us have, the resources to be able to go right off into a four-year university. And I feel like, I maybe could have been a little more successful, had I had really just that targeted support, to let me know about, things that I may have qualified for that, I maybe found out later in life by myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Guardian Scholars, that is available in just a few universities. And we have seen it be incredibly helpful for students, but it's not something that is nationally available. And I know I myself was an unaccompanied homeless youth, and I had zero support in college that was targeted to homeless youth. And I actually got connected my freshman year with Schoolhouse Connection. I reached out to them and got close and got some support from them. But overwhelmingly there was nothing targeted to my situation, and I didn't feel entirely understood, and that presents a significant barrier to students. Our next question is, as a coordinator for a mentoring program for teens in foster care, I would like to know, what do you wish people would have told you about college and or adult life after high school?
I'll take a go at it first. That's a great question. It made me, I had to kind of think about it first, but I think that unfortunately, I wish someone had told me that there is going to be still a lot more work to do, that I have to kind of create these opportunities for myself and reach out to these various programs like Guardian Scholars myself, that there is no instant connection. There is no program that's already weary of the situations that I'm going through or understanding of the lack of opportunities that we have at a public university like UCLA. So I think it would be something around the idea that we still have to work very, very hard to make these things available for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think alongside that, just from a provider perspective, Anthony, is like having professionals that can help you do some of that work through like connecting you to the resources, right? Because like websites for schools can be super confusing. It's hard to find resources that are targeted, even if they exist. We have students in California that didn't know Guardian Scholars was a thing, and they go to schools that have Guardian Scholars. It would have been super helpful for them, but they didn't know. And so, I think I think us as providers can take some of that work off of you by making you aware that there are some tasks in the future, but also giving you the information you need so you don't get hung up on them. Who else has something to share?
I'd like to share. I think I always had this image in my mind that, transitioning from foster care to adulthood was going to be hard. But I think also because of my experience, I thought, if I had issues, like people were going to come to me, they were going to seek me out, and so when that didn't come, I just failed. I just drowned instead. And, it took many years and many failures, on my own to figure out, okay, like, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like if I need something, I have to find it, because it's not just me whose life and well-being is at stake. It's my child's and then my two children, and so, it took, I think, a lot of years to be able to accept, rejection, and to be able to accept, no, there's nothing there for you. And for me to, to keep pushing it, because I have experienced this, at many places in life, but especially in my pursuit to education, is that I will get a lot of no's, but like just staying persistent and, and, to keep like bothering people and asking about the resources. And then, 3 months in, they don't want you to call anymore. So now they have the resource. And, I think it's really hard to do when you're young. And so, encouraging our youth and just telling them, what kind of questions to ask. I think that's so important. That's something that I work on with my students now. And, I will tell them, like, this is what you have to say. This is what you have to ask, like, don't accept no, like you just keep asking because there's something there. And hopefully some of that is cohesive. But, I think, the more that you like kind of put yourself out there and say like what it is that you need, like more people start talking and, then more resources come out. So
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else have anything to share? I know one thing I thought of was, Jason, you in particular mentioned, like, you hinted at like financial literacy. Like, who, attendees in the room, if you went to college, who told you about loans, credit cards, taxes, financial aid, all those pieces, right? For a
Yeah,
lot of us, it was parents, but for
right.
people,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I was gonna say is that, luckily I have some people in my corner that, like walk me through like how like what taking loans out in school will do to you like as you go on. But um not knowing that, and I know many kids in our situation don't really think about the consequences, or nobody's like, when it's mentioned by federal financial aid, they don't really like talk to you about what it's gonna do. I say one of the biggest things, I mean, in my situation, and I know like them, we're so used to doing things alone, and that like that's just what we've lived with, and we can get through stuff because that's what we've always done. But there's just a lot of preparation, I would say, not so much during the school, but like on the off periods. Like, you got to stay on top of your finding your FAFSA, and you got to stay on top of figuring out all these different things, and that's really challenging. Like, and I think most kids have like resources, have parents that are going to do that for them. They don't have to even think about it. But for us, it's like, man, if I don't file my FAFSA as soon as possible, I'm screwed. And like, I know many other kids are too, but they have parents that have been to college and stuff and know what to do. So I think a lot of that part of it is really tough. The other stuff of like figuring how to make ends meet, yeah, it's always tough for us, but like we're well equipped for that, I feel like. But the it's the other stuff that is just important. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I remember no one told me my dorm was going to close the month of December, and had like my guidance counselor or financial aid or housing, like someone just like mentioned it. I'm sure it was somewhere in one of the many emails I was navigating, but I was also homeless at the time, like focusing on survival. But that almost caused me to drop out freshman year. So I think it's hard because a lot of K-12 or child and youth providers, group homes, where when students turn a certain age, you're no longer working with them, right? Like, sometimes it's easy to feel stuck because you are having to stop services at a certain point and what happens after. But honestly, I think back, and even if someone had planted the seed, like, hey, just an FYI, your dorm closes the month of December. Like, I didn't need anything else from my guidance counselor. I could eventually figure it out myself, but I had someone mentioned it, right? So like planting those little seeds of what is to come in that first year of college or that first year of adulthood, things to look out for, if nothing else, I think can be helpful.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
It made me think about, back to the SAP stuff. When I first started college, I didn't know, like, if I accept financial aid, I have to get good grades. I have to show up, because then if I don't, that's when SAP comes up. And, if you don't work on a plan, you basically have to pay the money back. And so when I did really bad that first year in college, and decided not to go back, because I already accepted financial aid, I was now responsible for paying it back. So when I decided that I wanted to go back to college, I like couldn't, because I had to pay that money back first. And, I let it go for many years, and eventually they just took it out of my taxes. So, which really sucked at the time. But, I wish I knew that. I tell people all the time, my little sister just started college last year, and I was like, she's kind of struggling. And I'm like, don't you dare fail that class. Like, you will have to pay the money back, super on her about it. So, and I try to tell anyone that will listen, like, do not fail. Like, don't accept it if you think you're not going to do well, because you will have to pay it back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can have devastating impacts. I think it all comes down to, there's a certain level of self-sustainability that is inevitable, like in a goal, we want to be self-sustainable. We want to have the information necessary to navigate life. But that self-sustainability comes with that knowledge sharing. And so I think as much as can be presented in an efficient way, like in our program, I do a lot of like one pager emails with like, hey, pay attention, this is what's coming up in the next couple of months, or texts like, hey, FAFSA opened, things like that. It could even be a one pager you send off with students that's like highlights of what to pay attention to your first year of college, like something very simple, but something to at least flag the thought in their brain, and then connecting them, like we mentioned, with the warrant transfer referrals to resources on their campus that maybe can handhold them through the process when the time comes. And hopefully through some of the bills we mentioned today, that'll be easy once we have liaisons on college campuses and institutions of excellence, right? Okay, next up, we have some K-12 and higher ed staff in the room today. And if you had them walk away remembering one thing, what would that be? So these are people that are working with young people directly every day. What would you want them to remember?
I would like to speak on this one, and I think it goes directly to, I think, our second point of HESFI and about the liaison, which you just talked about. And it's just it's that, you know, from K through 12, there's actually liaisons that's job it is to work with homeless and foster youth and help them get the resources they need. But when you get past the 12 and you go to the college, which is, I mean, undoubtedly the most influential time in people's lives on whether they're going to move forward, move backwards, etc. Especially, I mean, it's so much more extenuated when you're talking about homeless youth and stuff like that. So I think, I mean, it's just, why don't we have people helping these kids, you know, at the higher level, and why aren't they, you know, recruiting more homeless and youth from the liaisons at the lower levels of education? So I think that's just like, spread the word. Like that's one of those things that HESFI could really fix, and it would be great. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you shared earlier how they can support HESFI. So that's great. Anyone else have things they would want providers to remember, walk away with?
You know, I think that it's just really important to try to know who our students are, to be able to identify, you know, which students might be struggling with that, you know, kind of assessing what that need is. And I think, you know, it's okay to not have all of the answers or to know all of the resources, but I think it's just, you know, our responsibility as, you know, the adults in our community to at least try to get them connected. You know, like if we don't know, you know, try to get connected to the person that does know. And, you know, I think that it makes all of the difference.
Yep, absolutely. Anyone else have anything? Okay. The next question is, what state is your college in? And do they provide tuition waivers, whether it be to foster or homeless youth? If you know, you can just share what state you're in if you're not sure.
I'm in North Carolina, and I'm unaware of anything like that. So
Yeah, and I'm no foster care expert. I know that North Carolina has the NC Reach program, which I know provides some funding specifically for foster. And I think there's also Chafee ETV funds potentially in North Carolina. I'm not aware of any homeless vouchers in North Carolina.
Yep, and I'm in California right now, Los Angeles, California, and I am not aware of, there probably is though, I would imagine.
I'm in California as well. I'm in Ventura County right now. I would say at the community college level, if you're low income or you have that, you know, foster youth background, I'm pretty sure most, if not all of your tuition does get paid for. I know that with transferring to Cal Poly Humboldt in the next couple of months, most of my tuition will be covered up to my bachelor's degree, but there will be some portion that I'm responsible for, mostly housing related stuff. But low income and foster youth, homeless, you essentially do have your tuition covered at the community college level. I'm not sure about the other ones.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, and the next question is, I work with foster youth and we call them and they don't come to events where they can get services to help them. Do you have any suggestions to increase attendance or engagement?
Maybe you could like let them bring someone with them. Like maybe if you don't know like who's going to be there, maybe you wouldn't be as excited to go, but maybe if you could like bring a friend or, you know, a family member, maybe it wouldn't be as intimidating.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I just kind of had an overarching idea of covering that. It's just look at them as more of like humans. These are students at the end of the day that are struggling with stuff that everybody else is probably struggling with as well. So just understanding that they're navigating through rough stuff as well. Um, and trying to just connect to them on a human level. So
I wonder too if we could be like, okay, you don't want to take this now, but you know, why don't you call me later if you change your mind, and have those, you know, resources or supportive services available or on hand, or can I email you about this? You know, just making it more accessible to them if for whatever reason they can't or don't want to go to that event.
I think unfortunately a lot of this stuff focuses on the negative, and I think one way you could do it is, you know, just share some of the ways that the system has worked and that people have got the help they need, and the way they get success. Maybe that will cause people to get more hope for it, and they're like, wow, if it changed this person's life and this person's life and this person's life, why can't I take some time out to help change others too?
Yeah, absolutely. And from, provider perspective, we work with young people all over. So we do a lot of virtual events, and it can be really challenging with different time zones, different schedules, different interests to get attendance to these events. I try to think of it in the same way, like Anthony mentioned, from a human perspective. What would I want to attend? Because the last thing I want to do at the end of a long workday is jump on another video call, right? Like that's not super exciting. And so what we try to do is offer a variety of different spaces that are both structured and unstructured. We also will do like gift card raffles, or sometimes if it's a really important topic, we pay every student. So for like financial aid, every single student that either attends the event live or meets individually with us, to Elizabeth's point, if they're not available, gets sent $25 gift card to like Amazon or Walmart, or sometimes we'll just send them $25. I also think in person, like food, having meals, having things that make it fun and engaging and resourceful. And that's something that you can do in-kind requests from local restaurants for. It's sometimes hard to find budgets for that kind of stuff, but in-kind requests can work wonders in the local community. I know I saw that in my last job as well. But I think it really combines what all three of you shared. It's what would view the students as humans. What are their schedules like? Number one. And then what would you want to attend? And then utilizing like the resources that are available to make it as engaging as possible. And I think Elizabeth's point is absolutely critical, because ultimately we want the students receiving the information. And if they can't attend the event live, that's okay. Like that is okay. How do we still get the information to them? So for us, we record the sessions, clip it so it's short, like 20 minutes, the main chunk, so they're not sitting there watching intros and conclusions. And then we also create a one-page draft of what was discussed. So we have like quick bullets of like, we talked about building a resume. Here's the takeaways and here's a template. And we send that via email. We also text them the link to it. Because at the end of the day, however they can receive the information is ultimately what matters. Okay.
Cool. I like that idea. I like all of that.
Yeah. Okay, so we only have like one more minute. So let me see here if there's any other ones that we'll ask. Let's see. Are there any organizations or supports that you worked with that you felt really listened to you, or who were the best to work with? So when you think like, who is someone or some group, organization that has like seen me as I am, listened to me, and what did that look like? What did they do?
It's hard not to say Schoolhouse Connection on that one. They gave us a platform. We're speaking here now because of it, and they do so much, and they let you share your stories, and they understand. Most of everybody I know that in Schoolhouse Connection has actually been through homelessness or foster youth, so it's not like they know where you're coming from, and I think they're a great organization.
Personally, I, have really been able to utilize the John Burton Advocates for Youth in the last couple of years. I had always heard about them growing up in foster care and stuff, but it wasn't until I was writing a random research paper in one of my classes that I stumbled upon their website because I was looking for information. And this was just a couple of years ago. And I saw all of these really great advocacy issues and implementations of law. And I was just intrigued, and I was like, I have to know more. And I didn't think at that point it was going to be relevant to my life. But one thing that I really value in JBay is that I'm 27. I have 2 kids. Historically, not a lot of programs are willing to serve my demographic, and it sucks because it took me later in life it took me a little bit longer to kind of get into this place. And so it's just really nice to have an organization that's not willing to turn me away because of those things. And, when it comes to, housing, educational barriers, even, health related stuff, they've been able to kind of get me connected to different things in my community and places that I'm looking at into moving. And it's really meaningful to me. And I definitely would recommend them and keep them at the top of your list as well as Schoolhouse Connection.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, and we can go in a little bit extra. I was thinking we were scheduled for an hour. We do have an hour and a half technically scheduled for this briefing. So I'll ask just a couple of other questions. We likely won't go the whole hour and a half, but I do want to get to some of these because we had a couple of other good ones pop up. So let me take just a second to glance at these. Okay. So how do young people find out about higher education resources for youth with experience in foster care and homelessness? How did you find out about the programs and resources that helped you?
I'll go first. I think I'm not going to speak for everybody. I'm going to speak for myself in this moment. I had the support systems in my life to kind of navigate me to the certain resources that are made available through UCLA, through the scholarship foundations that highlight foster youth and homeless youth, and youth and kids that go through situations like I did and that my peers did. So luckily I had that, but for those who don't have those support systems, who don't have people in their corner to help navigate through this, what are they doing?
I think for me, I've been in the community college scene for like 7 years, so I kind of already knew some of the stuff that was available to me. But I think, just being able to ask kind of the adult supporters and mentors in my life, as well as on-campus liaisons, that helped me. 211, I Google everything. But yeah, I think that kind of helped me get connected the most.
Anyone else have anything to share? Okay. I'll say for me, if I could go back and tell young me anything, it's like ask. And it's kind of sucks that you have to do that. Like it's not comfortable, and resources should be better advertised. But some of the greatest success that I found was in pushing, like Elizabeth did. Elizabeth is a great example of that. Like I struggled to receive financial aid. They tried to get me to do dependency overrides. I reached out to Barbara and Patricia, who work with Schoolhouse Connection, and asked for help. And I ended up receiving the information that I then brought to my financial aid office, and my financial aid office was wrong. And so, the letter that I brought them, they fixed it. And, national organizations obviously are limited in the support that they can provide, but often they do have a big network of providers. So when we have young people reach out to us, we do our best to connect them with someone in their local community. So I would say it never hurts to send an email, to reach out, to utilize resources like 211, like Elizabeth mentioned. And then also, one of the things that we do with our students is searching the school website. So looking for keywords: homeless, foster care, first generation, different keywords that may reference your situation where you may find targeted supports that are applicable. And then like today we mentioned Chafee, Education and Training Voucher Funds. You can Google Chafee ETV funds in your state to see if they're available in your state. So unfortunately, it takes a lot of navigating. And again, if we can move forward with some of these bills today, there'll be a little bit less navigating on your own eventually. But right now, I would say ask and utilize keywords to identify resources in your area and at your school. Okay, so our next question is, okay, so this is for Anthony and Elizabeth, because you both have foster care experience. If you're comfortable answering, what counties and states did you reside in when you were in foster care? And were you able to form a relationship and receive services from your ILP coordinator?
I am originally from LA. I was in foster care in Ventura County, Sacramento, and Kings County, which is like the Central Valley. And I went to like 15 different high school. I lived in the group home settings. I was like all over the place. I did have like ILP classes along the way after I was like 16 or something. I mean, they were helpful. I mean, my brain wasn't even fully developed then, so I don't know how helpful it was. And I think, like I mentioned, because I was moving all the time, going to all these different schools, I really didn't have the opportunity to connect with anyone, you know, person, place, or thing. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I was super fortunate to have met someone kind of on my way out of foster care as I was getting ready to leave, that, you know, was just a tutor at my group home and just really wanted to keep in contact with me. And it's, you know, literally because of them that I, you know, finished high school an entire year later and just got connected to services. Like, he didn't know anything about the foster care realm, but because he cared so much about my outcome, like he asked any and everybody that would listen, you know. And, you know, it's because of just having that one person that cared about me in my life that I feel like I can be here. But, you know, other than that, I don't think that I was anywhere long enough, or, you know, in a relationship that I felt safe enough in, that, you know, I really could trust anyone. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to clarify, because I used an acronym, ILP is Independent Living Program. So I don't know, Anthony, did you have any experience?
I'm coming from San Diego County, born and raised in San Diego. So I did not have any involvement with ILP, but I knew a lot of my peers in the foster care system that went into independent living post foster care. So, yep.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Elizabeth, this question's for you. How were you able to ultimately regain access to financial aid? And did you have to attend without receiving aid?
Oh boy. So 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, the pandemic started. I lost my waitressing job, which I was super content with at the time. And I had nothing to do. So I was like, well, you know, I can't work anywhere. So maybe I'll just take some classes. And, you know, I already gave up on school a long time ago. I thought I'm not smart enough for school. And, you know, I ended up doing really well that first semester, like so well that I was like, well, maybe I'll just try another semester. And so I ended up doing really well. And which is why I'm still here. It was kind of by chance. But yeah, so because even though my debt had been paid off to the school, you know, for accepting that financial aid and basically leaving for several years, um, they still didn't trust me, you know, kind of rightfully so. And so I had to pay out of pocket for my costs there. I want to say that first year. I was really just determined at that point, I guess, to make it work. And so I was just really, really persistent with the financial aid office and the liaison there, like, hey, like this, you know, doesn't fit my situation. Like, what can I do? What can I write? You know, like, I know you're on the committee, like, tell me what I need to write. And, you know, the first time that I did the SAP, it didn't get approved. So that meant that the second semester I had to pay it again. And I was like, you know what, like, I'm so committed to this path now. I'm not going to let this stop me. So if I have to pay it, I'll pay it. But, you know, it really hurt me at the time. And so I did it again. And I, in my SAP, I had to appeal it again the next semester. And I was like, hey, like, please look at my grades, like look at what I'm doing now compared to 7 years ago. And like, just please consider this, And so I want to say after that first year of having to appeal both semesters, they accepted it. They ended up paying me back for the year that I paid, which was great and very helpful. And I didn't have problems going forward. But, I think just initially not having kind of that knowledge beforehand, that first time I tried to do it, not knowing that I could go outside of those boxes, outside of those listed extenuating circumstances, I already felt defeated. I didn't want to, I was like, oh, I can't, but, it was only because I was willing to have them tell me no, basically, and ask them, well, tell me how I can make it better. What can I say? My situation isn't on here. This is what my situation was, but, like, how can I appeal? Like, that helps me the most. And I had to do that every semester. And, it really wasn't easy and it was hard, but, I'm glad to be over it. And, I can help, my future students do the same thing. So if they need it. Did I
Yeah.
answer the question?
Yeah, you did. And the fact you were able to pay out of pocket for a whole year, that, I mean, it just shows the determination that you had, but also like, it's so frustrating to me because you shouldn't have had to do that. But big congrats on soon starting college at Humboldt and beginning your next journey. That's huge. So I'm glad that you're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but how frustrating. That's such a burdensome process you went through.
I honestly think the SAP is the whole reason that I'm doing really well right now, because I just don't want to have to pay the money back at the end of it. So I'm using it to motivate me to do well. So,
but it's also the very thing that almost made it impossible for you to get back in. So it's like motivation slash literally what almost caused you to not get a college degree. So frustrating, but well done with your advocacy and resiliency. Okay. So our last question is, have you experienced a financial aid over award situation? So getting more aid than, I think they mean getting more aid than you needed. If yes, how did the college or university communicate this with you? Did you receive an email or a phone call explaining the situation? Was the college compassionate about the situation? I guess I'm not sure if they mean getting more aid or not enough aid, but in general, let's make it a little more general. How has financial aid communication been for you? Have you seen compassion from the financial aid office? Have you been notified of changes in your aid or of documents that you've needed? Like, what has the process been like for you in general with financial aid?
It's been a pain for me. Like I think I've highlighted many ways that it's been painful for me, but I have had cases where I had more financial aid, and that was communicated well, because I had front loaded scholarships, but yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I know for you, Jason, you've shared like struggling getting because you're doing your financial aid as an independent student and struggling with that determination as an unaccompanied homeless youth. I know that's been challenging to say the least these last couple of years. Anyone else want to share? Or Jason, if you had more to share. Okay. I know for me as well, financial aid was what almost caused me to drop out of college. Again, Barbara, Patricia, they provided me with a Dear Colleague letter that showed that my financial aid office was wrong. I had to give that letter every single year. I received very, very little compassion. And there was, in general, a lack of knowledge and understanding surrounding homeless youth, and I imagine foster youth as well. With that said, we at Schoolhouse Connection, we work with some rock star financial aid administrators. So they're out there. It just comes down to a need for an increase in education and a need for a simplification of the financial aid processes, because it is so unbelievably challenging on both ends, on the financial aid end as well as on the students end, which I see it play out every year in the lives of all of our Schoolhouse Connection scholars and outside students that reach out to us. it is a battle. You heard Elizabeth's battles. It is a battle like that every year for students to get financial aid. Whereas like how Anthony mentioned with HESHP, processes can be seamless for house students. Financial aid can be seamless for house students, and it can be a months long battle for homeless and foster often. Okay, so with that said, I am going to transition to closing. If any attendees want to drop in the chat and send any messages to our students, feel free during this time. And students, I will open it up one more time if you all have any final thoughts or things you want attendees to walk away with.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I've worked with Anthony before and I've met him and stuff, and we didn't really get to share our stories, but I never worked with Elizabeth, and I thought your story was really, I know I see the comment section going up, but your story is really great, and I'm glad that you can open up and speak on behalf of us. I think it's great. And you know, for everybody listening, she's one person, we're one person, we're three people together here, but there's so many more like us. And I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be advocates for these people, and nobody did it better than Elizabeth today. So if we were in person, I would clap a lot for you. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, all three of you knocked it out of the park. You guys go into the chat while you're thinking of your final thoughts. You can see all the messages the attendees are sending. You all did such a fabulous job. Anthony or Elizabeth, any final thoughts before I close this out? Okay. So thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we hope that it was informative and inspirational. We, as I'm sure you all now, are so proud of all that Anthony, Jason, and Elizabeth have accomplished, and we know that their future opportunities are endless. Our hope is that through the bills and programs shared today, we see these same outcomes in the lives of students experiencing homelessness and foster care across our country. We've shared our contact information in the chat. It's also going to be available in the follow-up resources sent via email. Please reach out if you have any questions. We also have resources on Schoolhouse Connection, JBay, and the Youth Law Center's websites. And yeah, with that, thank you for joining us. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day.